So if you find this sleep story helpful or interesting, then give it a thumbs up, leave any comments that you've got below, and if you aren't already, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you can receive notifications of when future sleep stories go live. I have dozens and dozens of stories already on my channel that you can go and search. I also release new stories every single week, so I hope you enjoy this story. Okay, so as you listen to this relaxing sleep story, you can just take a moment to close your eyes. Allow yourself to get comfortable and begin to drift off asleep. And I don't know whether you'll drift off asleep faster with the sound of my voice or the spaces between my words. And as you comfortably fall asleep, so I'll just tell this story in the background. And this story is about a mouse called Klaus. And this mouse called Klaus is scurrying around one Christmas Eve. And this mouse scurries around pretty much every single night. And this Christmas Eve, this mouse scurries around and notices that there's a saucer with some food on it. And the mouse thinks that this is unusual, because normally there's no food left out, and Klaus has to go exploring to try and find the food. And so Klaus goes over to that food, takes some of that food, holds it in his front paws, and nibbles away at that food, and then sees that there's a glass of milk, and so drinks some of that milk, feeling that that helps the food go down. And on this Christmas Eve, everyone in this house has already gone to bed. The lights are all out, and Klaus goes over and turns on the Christmas lights. He stands on the switch, and the Christmas lights come on the tree. And Klaus steps back, looking up at that Christmas tree, almost mesmerised by those lights as they twinkle on that green tree. And Klaus can smell the smell of that tree, that pine smell. And a fake fire has been left on in the living room that looks almost like real flames. It gives off warmth, but in reality it's just an image on a screen. And Klaus quite likes these nights where he has free rein of a house. He comes out from his home, he wanders around, he plays with things, he gets some food, he enjoys his night before the people in this home wake up in the morning. And Klaus can hear some bell sounds in the background, and climbs up onto the windowsill, puts his paws up on the window, puts his nose to the window and looks outside. And you can see the street lights outside, snow outside. can notice how calm and quiet everything looks outside. And then he hears a thud. And following the thud, he notices some sparkling and twinkling lights appearing in mid-air. And then what looks almost like a swirl of smoke. And suddenly Santa appears there. And Klaus assumed, like the people in this house assumed, that Santa isn't real. That all the presents under the tree are placed there by the parents, and some of the presents are placed by the kids, but none of the presents are placed by Santa. And yet here is this man in red suddenly appearing in this room with a sack on his back. And he takes that sack off his back, plops it down beside him. He takes some presents out, places them under the tree. He has a sip of the milk, eats some of the food, and picks the sack up again. And as that smoky effect begins again, and the sparkling lights begin again, Klaus bounds across the room and jumps up and grabs the sack. The next minute Klaus finds himself on the roof, clinging onto the sack, as the sack is placed, among other sacks, in the back of a sleigh. And Klaus thinks to himself that this sleigh seems unusual, that the space behind Santa is actually only a reasonably small space. And yet these sacks that are placed into this space actually end up in a vast, cavernous space. And Santa then can be heard to encourage the reindeer to get moving, and then launches off that roof with incredible speed. And almost instantaneously is on another roof in another row of houses. And Klaus is curious how Santa delivers these presents. So he crawls up that sack as Santa's pulling it out of the back of the sleigh. And he jumps down onto the sleigh itself, hides out of Santa's view, watches Santa get off that sleigh. And Santa's got a huge sack on his back. And then Klaus watches Santa run along to the first chimney. He touches that chimney, and in a puff of swirling smoke he disappears. And then almost instantaneously he's back again. And then he seems to free run across the rooftops, running along, touching the chimney as he zaps himself down into the building
and then appears back again, before bounding along the rooftops further, doing the same again and again at every single property, running with incredible speed, almost like a blur between points where he stops at the chimneys. And then with the last house in the street, when he reappears, almost like a blur, he flashes along the rooftops, back to the sleigh, drops the bag, drops the sack back in the back of the sleigh, before the sleigh launches and moves onto the next row of houses. And even at this speed, Klaus thinks there's no way that Santa can deliver to every single house in one night. And Klaus watches as Santa repeats this over and over again, property after property, rows of houses after rows of houses. And Klaus thinks to themselves that this is really taking a long time, even at this speed. That many hours have passed, and Santa hasn't even left this country yet. Then after many hours, Santa's sleigh and the reindeer rise up higher in the air, and then accelerate rapidly, arriving in another country just in moments. And Klaus hung on expecting to be thrown off with that acceleration, and yet felt nothing, almost like they may as well have just been stationary. And so in the new country, Klaus gazed over the side as the sleigh landed on the first roof, and could see there were still some people milling around, that over here some people in this location hadn't yet gone into their homes. But Klaus then, on first glance, didn't notice, but on second glance, realised that nobody seems to be moving. And Klaus watched very closely. And there was someone walking down the street, carrying a warm drink. And there was steam rising up from that warm drink. And Klaus noticed that actually that steam is moving, and that the people are moving, but they're doing so incredibly slowly, that somehow time has been slowed down to almost a standstill. And Klaus realised how Santa manages to deliver everything in one night, that somehow Santa can slow time right down. And so although Santa's travelling incredibly fast as well, just travelling fast isn't enough to deliver to every single property. Time has to be slowed down as well. And for what to Klaus seemed like hours and hours and hours, was actually passing in a very short space of time. And Santa got to the end of his deliveries, and then headed home, back towards the snowy poles. And back at home, that's when Santa noticed he'd got a stowaway in the sleigh. And he sat down and he looked over at Klaus, and Klaus nervously looked back, and Santa, in a deep voice, asked Klaus where he came from, and what he's doing here, and explained he'll need to go home, because here isn't necessarily suitable for a mouse. It's very cold. And Klaus was a curious mouse, and explained that he was curious. He was interested by how much space there seemed to be in the sleigh. That there seems to be just the tiniest of spaces, big enough for a sack of presents for just a handful of houses. And yet the space is cavernous when you enter it, almost like it's much, much bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And there seems to be a mechanism that seems to make sure that the right sacks get in Santa's reach at the right times, so that Santa can just reach behind him, take the sack that he needs, and then go and do his deliveries, come back, and once the sack is empty, just drop that sack into the cavernous space, and the next sack in reach will be the right sack for the next deliveries. And Klaus was curious about this. How did it work? How did Santa design, or who designed, some kind of flying machine that's pulled by magical reindeer, that has more space on the inside than the outside? And Santa explained that it's kind of an illusion, that in reality there's barely any space that's there. But Santa explained that the way the sleigh has been designed is that that space is actually a portal, that what you pass through and what Santa reaches into isn't reaching into the space behind Santa's seat. It's reaching through a portal into Santa's warehouse, and that all the presents get prepared. They all get put in their relevant locations in the warehouse, attached to the mechanisms that move each bag, one at a time as needed, up to the portal. And that the portal's just opened when Santa sets off, and one end of the portal is in the warehouse, the other end of the portal is on Santa's sleigh. And so he reaches through the portal and just takes the next bag. And Klaus was curious about why time seems to have ran so slowly. And Santa said that many centuries ago he arrived on Earth, and he noticed so much poverty, so many people struggling, and he tried to use his advanced technology to help people of Earth, but trying to help looking like a very different being just seemed to scare people. And he realised that people were less afraid of someone that looked like a friendly older man, and that with their technology they've been able to, as alien species, traverse the stars, because they're able to slow time right down, so that reality passes incredibly slowly. And they've got advanced technology so they can move pretty quickly. They can warp space and time as they move, so that technically the sleigh never moves anywhere. Space and time moves around the sleigh. And that's why there's no jolt of acceleration. And that by remaining in the suit that they're wearing, that's holographically made to look like Santa, with an advanced form of hologram that's tactile as well as visual, they age at this slow rate as well. So everything they do is at this slow rate all the time. And that the space between one Christmas and the next just seems to take so long, giving plenty of time to source all the presents, to wrap all the presents, and that there are many of these aliens here. They go and do all the deliveries, but there are others who work preparing and wrapping things, that actually Santa is just the deliveryman, a bit like a typical post person, that they've been interested in how different myths have built up about them around the world, that often place them as being the one in charge, with all their helpers doing all the preparation, when the reality is that they're not the one in charge. Their job is the delivery person. And others' job is to prepare and source products. Others' job is to wrap products. Others' job is to make sure they're in the right sacks. Others' job is to make sure those sacks are in the right place. So everyone has a job. And as time is slowed down, even though they're able to move as if they're moving in real time and everything else is slow, they can move really fast, but internally they're no different to the rest of the time, that they age incredibly slowly, matching the world around them that's created by their technology. And Klaus finds this incredibly fascinating and wants to go and explore, wants to check out the different warehouses, check out the process of how it's all done. And Santa explained that their role is to try to bring happiness and joy to people. That they can't just reveal themselves and say we're an alien race with advanced technology, because humanity hasn't quite reached that point yet. That some would love aliens to reveal themselves, but their technology is too advanced to be able to be understood and handled by all these people. That they're able to use their technology to communicate with different animals on different planets, whether it's humans or mice or any other kind of animal. And that they've got this technology for creating portals, for creating warp drives, but they couldn't just give this technology away because it would be too advanced to be received. But once humanity on this planet have caught up and are approaching the level of technology where the leap wouldn't be so great, then they can reveal themselves and see how they can help humanity. But in the meantime, they just do their bit to try to help humanity to feel good, to appreciate each other, to continue on this growth they've been doing for the last few thousand years. They explained how they've seen humanity go from enjoying barbaric practices, not really recognizing that people have feelings, not really treating humans as human. And gradually this has improved, and people have recognized that if something feels bad to them, it probably feels bad to others. And now they're at the point where humanity has pretty much stopped keeping people as property, pretty much stopped wanting to go and enjoy public displays of harm to others, and starting to focus on their role within the wider world and how to treat all things with respect and kindness. And yet there's still some way to go, but they're well on their way. And Santa said they just need a bit of extra encouragement, some feel-good things, not expensive gifts, but gifts that just make them feel special, make them feel like those around them understand them. So where they can, they give these gifts. And Santa said that he's going to get Klaus back home. And Klaus thought he was going to get another ride on a sleigh with those reindeer. But Santa said there's no need. We can create portals to anywhere. And he creates a portal to the living room that Klaus came from. Klaus walks through that portal saying goodbye to Santa. Walks out into that living room. Turns off those Christmas lights. And thinks to himself that no one would believe him if he tried to tell anyone the story of his experience. He goes back into his home and settles down for the night. And on waking on Christmas morning, He finds a little stocking at the end of his bed with a small lump of cheese and a note from Santa saying, "A gift from me to you. Merry Christmas." And the mouse looks out of his home, out into that room, and sees a family sitting around excitedly opening their presents, thanking each other, enjoying each other's company. And he begins to understand what Santa is trying to do. And that night, feeling good and relaxed, the mouse drifts and floats asleep.